John Lawrence Reynolds has authored or co-authored more than 30 books. John is a past president of the Crime Writers of Canada. He has won 3 Arthur Ellis Awards for mystery fiction, and a National Business Book Award, and an Authors Award from the Foundation for the Advancement of Canadian Letters. John lives in Burlington, and we welcome him today. John, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, Mike, it's my pleasure. I enjoy it.
Well, I'll tell you, you have had an exciting few weeks. Your latest novel, Beach Blonde, was released just a few weeks ago, and I know you've been busy with book signings and visits to various bookstores. What's the reaction to the new novel been?
It's been very positive. It is the second book in a trilogy that began with a book called Beach Strip, and the third book in the trilogy will be called Beach Blues. And for those who pick up a copy of Beach Blonde, they'll find the 2 opening chapters to Beach Blues tacked onto the back end of it. And you and I, as old advertising marketing types, will know this as pre-selling or something like that. But anyway, it's there.
I know what you mean. And John, for our listeners, maybe you could just give us, I don't want you to give anything away, but maybe you could give us a little bit of a thumbnail of the story.
Well, of course, Beach Strip was very much of a mystery novel told in the voice of Josie Marshall, who is the widow of the individual who's murdered at the beginning of the book. And the book tracks in her voice her solution of the mystery. Everyone believes her husband committed suicide. Josie's convinced he didn't, and the book traces her progress to what I think is a surprising finale. Got a good deal of response from the book. People want to know when something else was coming up. And in between other writing projects, I took a crack at it now and then. The biggest problem I had was, and I like writing books that are character-driven, Beach Strip was to me an investigation of Josie's character. I loved writing her voice, which, by the way, was the voice in my head of Susan Sarandon. So much to my wife's indulgence, I lived with Susan Sarandon in my head for about a year, but the marriage survived. We're doing fine. And I really couldn't, as much as I enjoyed that, I really couldn't write the next book in her voice as well. So I made her a character who kind of ambles in a little bit later in the book, and as the book progresses, becomes more and more major character until she ends the story in a literally explosive means. And I'll just leave it at that. It tracks all of the action takes place on the Beach Strip, which runs between Hamilton and Burlington and separates the west end of Lake Ontario from Hamilton Bay and Lake Ontario. And it's a very unique area. It's about, I'm guessing here, 3.5 kilometers long, perhaps 100 meters wide generally. And it has 2 enormous bridges on it, various traffic, and an enormous cast of characters, which I really like, plus a place called Tuffy's, which is the kind of hangout for the area, and that's where a good deal of action takes place as well.
Now, when you included Josie as a main character in Beach Blonde, as you did in your original book, had you started out thinking that you would have a trilogy, or has that developed since you started?
No, I was encouraged by my agent and by publisher at Bay to come up with a second book, which was a bit of a challenge, but primarily because I really didn't see writing it in Josie's voice again. And just want to make a point here, Mike, that readers might be interested in, and most authors understand this. Most books consist of 3 primary elements: characters, plot, and setting. And if you can get 2 out of 3 of those pretty solidly, you've got yourself a book started. I obviously had a setting. I wanted to set it on Beach Strip. And the character was Josie, but I didn't want to make her the central character. Again, it would sound like an echo of Beach Strip. And a friend told me, he was involved many years ago in the Toronto construction development trade, of some of the pretty rough characters who he encountered in that trade. And one of them was a chap who exercised muscle, both figuratively and literally, and getting his way for large projects and a couple of the tricks he would use. And this character lived in my mind for quite a while, and I thought, I'm going to use a book that employs him as a driving character. Certainly not as a hero. In fact, he's very much a villain, but someone who the story can evolve from and take place that way. And part of the enjoyment of doing this is coming up with a character and watching him or her develop, only because the character becomes alive in the writer's mind. This sounds kind of mysterious, I suppose, and mystical, but every fiction author will agree the best books work out when the character is so alive in the author's mind that he or she starts wielding off on various travels of their own. And that's when things become alive to everyone. And that's what happened in this book.
You become a little schizophrenic through the process.
I've been called worse, but it's not schizo. Yeah, I guess I don't know. It's I'd rather write it than talk about it. But I have a number of author friends, some pretty well known, like Linwood Barkley, who's a local neighbor, and so on. And we all agree that we have to be a little bit off center to write fiction, because otherwise we'd be doing things like, I don't know, accountancy or something like that. None of which we are suitable for.
Now, in choosing the beach strip as the locale, and you've told us a little bit about where it is geographically, did you choose that area because of its general uniqueness, or was it a comfortable fit because it's close to home?
Well, yeah, I think both of those. I like the idea of having a specific locale. I've written a series of other novels, Mike, mystery novels. One was set, a long series, was set in Boston and featured a hard-nosed Boston detective. I've written a series of novellas featuring, this is interesting, perhaps, again, a woman as the main character, and she's a sheriff of a small town of Muskoka. And I like being familiar with the setting. Part of the fun of the Boston books was I had to research them and spend 3 or 4 days in Boston wandering around the city and doing strange things like saying, gee, that'd be a nice place to find a body. So that's what happens when you write mystery novels. I didn't have to go that far for Beach Strip, and it wasn't quite that kind of a book. But I just like a locale that has some specifics to it, as opposed to any city, any old where. I just don't respond to that very well.
Having read an advanced copy of the book, and I thank you very much for that, the one thing that stood out for me, and you've already touched on it, was how the characters started at the beginning of the novel, and they developed as we went along. And I really, really love that, because at one point you think you know the character that you're dealing with, and then you suddenly see a little bit different side of their character, and now you're not quite sure, where are they in this thing? Even the bad guys tend to have a different side to them that is revealed. That must take a lot of development.
If the character is strong enough, Mike, as I said earlier, the character leads you that way. There's a villain in the book who's pretty nasty and frankly pretty dumb with what he does, especially involved with his boss's girlfriend. But leave that for the moment. And he comes to a very violent end. But just before that happens, I use some tricks to make the reader feel just a little bit sorry for him. And I was glad of the way that came. As far as that work that goes into it, once again, it comes down to how alive is the character in the author's mind, and there's obviously a direct linkage with that, how alive the character is in the reader's mind. And in that particular case, this character, I wanted him as a bit of a sideline. I thought, no, this guy is just too bad to leave alone. And he became dumber and dumber until finally he gets his comeuppance. And this is an important part, not the critical plot, but important part of the plot. We're looking for things to keep driving the plot forward. And this is always important in this genre, of course. There are let's call them mainstream novels, in which most of the action takes place within the characters' minds. In these kinds of novels, I want the action to take place driven by the characters and what they do. And that's what happens in this one.
Well, it's interesting too. In the development of your book, and I noticed this as I got further and further into the book, there's a very steady pace to it. It starts off at a good pace, and it maintains that. Every so often, it has a spike in tremendous action and events, but then the pace continues. Getting that balance for an author, that must take both a lot of patience and a lot of work to try and make sure that it's well balanced all the way through.
I think you're right to a degree, but of course, if the story is strong enough, as I say, and the character is strong enough, they drive it forward. As for, and thank you for the kind words about how it keeps moving. One of my heroes in genre fiction is Elmore Leonard, and many of his books. If you're a fan of thrillers and crime fiction, you'll know who Elmore was. Oh gosh, 8 or 10 of his books were turned into generally very good movies, like the George Clooney book George Clooney movie Out of Sight, and there were several others as well. Anyway, someone asked Elmore Leonard. He said, "So many of your books become bestsellers. They're very popularity. What's the secret of your popularity?" And Elmore thought a moment, and he said, "I leave out the parts that people skip." Which I thought maybe just about the most profound comment an author can make in terms of explaining his popularity. So I've never forgotten that. And it's not that I want to write comic books. I want to have something that resonates with the reader. But I've never forgotten that. Well, people skip that part, then we don't have to mention it. And that's the
It's a bit like the old comedy line, timing is everything.
Yes.
And certainly that holds true. I gave you a few lines of when we were communicating over the mail, how I saw the book, this wonderful book, Beach Blonde, as a good meal. And I know it was corny as hell, but
no, it works.
As I thought about it, it seemed to make a lot of sense. First of all, the story itself, is a delicious main course. If you're a thriller fan, you'll love that. You serve it up so well; it's beautifully served, and it gets better as the meal goes along. And then at the end of it, after it's all done, you sit back and you go, "Wow, that was great. That was a good meal." And the book really does hit on all those high points, I believe.
Well, thank you very much. And just without revealing too much, as you might recall, there's a little twist at the end in which I have a little bit of fun with the reader. And I'll just leave it at that. You have to read through the entire book to understand what the twist is. And if that's considered to be a bit of a teaser to get people to buy and read the book, I'm guilty. What can I say?
Well, it made the last number of pages so fulfilling, and I think anybody that reads it will feel the same way. Now, you say that you'll be going back to the beach strip again for a third book.
Yes.
Do you see that in the next 2 years, 3 years?
No. I've got a contract that says I have to deliver the finished manuscript on March the 1st.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I know. And the problem is I'm deeply involved in I do a lot of ghostwriting, a lot of commission books. I'm deeply involved with a former senior cabinet minister in the federal government to write his story of what actually occurred in the government. And that has the same delivery date on the manuscript. So you use the term schizophrenic. I just might be bouncing between a federal cabinet minister and Beach Blues, which involves a bad luck folk singer who gets caught up in a murder. Yeah, I might be that. But, I trust on my friends and my wife to keep me as sane as I need to be to do it.
Well, good news for all of us as readers that we'll be able to look forward to that third book in the trilogy, probably by next fall.
It'll be about this time next year if all goes well.
That's wonderful. Now, going back to Beach Blonde for a second, and I do want to make the comment to people who like to buy books for friends. This would make a great Christmas gift. If you've got someone who loves mystery novels, you've got someone who likes to read this would be a great gift to give them.
Well,
And
thank you for that.
while we're doing that, plug, John, how might people get your book right now?
Well, I know that Amazon has copies available and pushing it, as well as Indigo chapters. Most of the major retail booksellers, bless their hearts, who are still around in the larger cities, stock it. So I think they will be available. Mind you, we've got 3 weeks left before Christmas, but the books are out there. There's enough time to pick them up. I dearly hope, obviously, people enjoy them and pass them around and write back to me. I'd love to hear from readers, even when they say, by the way, there's a typo on page 73. I said, oh my goodness. But I also like to hear from readers who comment about characters and who see things into the characters that I never saw myself, but I realize, you know what? They're right. That's what she's like. And that sort of thing. So this is part of the fun of being a genre writer, to get this kind of feedback and exchange with readers. It brings the book alive, it brings the characters alive. Frankly, it brings the lonely job of sitting here in this place 4 or 5 hours a day, hitting my head against the wall to come up with the next twist in the plot sometimes. It makes it all worthwhile. Well,
it sounds like despite the hitting your head on the walls.
Yeah, see the scars here?
That it's been a very successful career to date, and congratulations on this latest contribution to mystery writing. It's a great book. And
thank you so much, Mike.
I thank you very much for joining us today. This has been a lot of fun.
I've enjoyed it too, and it's good to see and talk with you again.
We'll have to do it when the next one comes around.
Okay, maybe we can do it over a beer. Is that okay? But it's okay to say that?
That's a great idea. Thanks very much, John.
Take care, Mike. Bye-bye.
Our guest today has been John Lawrence Reynolds, and his new book, Beach Blonde, is available now. And don't forget, in Halliburton, you can order it through Masters Bookstore. Now, I do encourage you to find out more about John's novels, and you can do that by going to writer.ca. That's WRYTER.ca.